Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another continuation of the MCU Rewatch. Once again, this is just me rewatching the MCU movies so far. This time I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Avengers Age of Ultron. Granted, at the time of me recording this, I have not watched Age of Ultron, so I'll watch that another day and just kind of cut the recordings together, so just kind of letting you know ahead. But first of all, since I should have watched Guardians, or at least rewatched it at this point in time, once again, this is like my third time rewatching Guardians, so that's kind of crazy. It's the only Marvel movie I've seen this much so far. I just think that's kind of interesting. But nevertheless, I think even the third time through still holds up. It's kind of incredible when you still think about it, because it's like, this is like the first space adventure, because most things, like obviously you have bits of Avengers taking place off-world because it's like, oh yeah, the S.h.i.e.L.D. and all of that. I mean, plus it kind of deals with Thanos. But then you also have Thor too, but that's kind of like, that's almost like the Doctor Strange situation where like it takes place in a different world. You do kind of cross space and stuff like that. So it's like, it's still kind of technical, but this is the more like, oh yeah, we're going through space on a ship, so it's the most like I said, space adventure. So I think that's what makes Guardians still stand out, even like going backwards. Like still at this point in time, it still holds up because it's the first movies to ever really do that. There's a lot of stuff rewatching, especially the third time, because like this is my first time subsequently rewatching it since Guardians 2. So I like, especially when you look at Peter's mom situation, and you're like, oh man, knowing what you know in Guardians 2, it just makes that situation even sadder, because you're like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. And then on top of that, like especially stuff like Yondu says, it's like, oh, it's a good thing we never handed Peter over to his ass. Yeah, that dude was kind of a dick anyway. It's like, man, you have no idea, you know? I mean, it's one thing too I'm curious about too, when it comes to using the Infinity Stone at the end, obviously him being half something else, him being the whole situation he is in Volume 2, obviously. It helped him harness the Infinity Stone. Could that be why he lasted as long as he did? Because Gamora lasted as long as she did in space because her body was modified. But it's like, is that one of the reasons? I mean, I guess maybe being what he is still wouldn't have stopped him from dying in space like that. It probably wouldn't even, I mean, I wonder would that have affected anything, like would something have happened at that point in time. I do like that being kind of like, even though Peter can kind of be a little scummy throughout the movie, because even Gamora kind of calls him out for it, because it's like the fact of the matter is all you care about is money and stuff like that. He still has his hero moments, because it's like, yeah, it's like, wait, what's gonna happen to Gamora? All these people piss at her. They wouldn't actually, the guards would actually protect her. Right? He acts like he's just kind of a rogue bandit, but the fact of the matter is he actually does care. I mean, even growing up with a crew like Yondu, like, and the Ravengers, he still cares that he ended up the way he did, that even hanging with Yondu for all those years still didn't like 100% change him, you know? I mean, the question that does cross your mind is like, who would Peter have been if he wasn't raised by Yondu? I think rewatching this too, you still kind of gain an appreciation for how smart Rocket is, being able to kind of piece things together in like a moment, especially the whole prison escape. Obviously, even he had it planned out, but it's like, okay, so we got to do this and that. And Groot kind of messes things up, so they had to like do things much faster, right? But under pressure, he's still able to kind of piece things together and just kind of fire himself, especially that moment nowhere where him and Drax are arguing, and like he's getting super drunk and he's like melancholy, because it's like Drax keeps calling him vermin and Gamora calls him stuff, and he's just kind of pissed, and he's just kind of like, I didn't ask to be made this way. I was like, I'd forgotten he had this little drunk moment, and just like, oh, it's so heartbreaking, because he's just so sad, because like, I didn't ask to be this, and she's calling me a freak, and it's just like, ugh, you know, just him being so heartbroken about his situation. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. Another thing that this movie does well, like still I feel holds up, is like the teamwork. Them all having their differences, being from different backgrounds, and still kind of coming together to be this misfit team of heroes. Like even on this, because the Avengers are like these top tier heroes or whatever. It's like, I mean, even comic book wise, that's what made this movie kind of come together, because these were characters nobody knew about. Like they're very kind of like obscure characters to a certain extent, and it's like you have them come together in this movie that really bolstered them. Because after it just came out, like there was even a Guardians of the Galaxy like cartoon that eventually came out too, kind of tying in with it in it. I mean, I don't know if it ties in, but you get what I'm trying to say. So it's just kind of interesting that this band of misfits, and you can always love that part of a story. It's a band of misfits. Like I feel like the Avengers, yeah, there's a group of knuckleheads, but this is like the ultimate group of knuckleheads, which I even love when Peter sending the message later on to Wanda Nova Corps, like, hey, I might be an asshole, but he's like, I quote, I'm not completely a dick. But speaking of wanting a Nova Corps and stuff like that, which kind of keeps popping up in my mind, will we ever get Nova in these movies? Like, I feel like, I mean, Nova's another character, like Luke Cage and Iron Fist. The only reason why I know about him is because of Ultimate Spider-Man, the cartoon. He's part of the team, which that's also where you learn about him being part of the Guardians. That was kind of interesting when I watched those episodes, because I'd seen Guardians at that point in time. I was like, oh my god, you know, so that was kind of cool to me to find out. So that could be something they do. I mean, Mantis joined the group at the end of 2, so who's to say, like, I mean, we already know there's going to be a Guardians 3, so maybe Nova will pop up then, potentially, I don't know. Because the Nova Corps hasn't popped back up, because I don't, to my knowledge, once again, I might be forgetting, but I don't remember the Nova Corps ever popping up again. And 2, they might have popped up for a little bit. They just definitely didn't play as big as of a storyline in 2 as they did in 1. And that's another thing too I'm curious about when it comes to Ronan. Like, he had the Infinity Stone and everything like that, and he was like, oh, after he destroys Kandor, then he's going to come after Thanos. But it's like, even with that Infinity Stone, like, would you actually even stood a chance against Thanos? Like, I mean, for one, it's power that even he never had it long to fully utilize it anyway. I mean, maybe eventually it would have killed him too, maybe because he put it in his weapon that did kind of subside some of the power sweeping through him, because holding onto it directly would have killed him, so it gave him kind of an outlet to put it in. I don't know. Or maybe that's still representing the fact is he still could have wielded it even in his bare hands. I don't know. Maybe putting it in his hammer weapon what made it more manageable. I'm kind of leaning towards like, nah, Thanos is too much of a baddie on his own for you to really do that. I mean, at least that's my thought process. And there's also the whole situation with the Collector. Like, I wasn't crazy. I was wondering about that when I watched that end scene with, well, mid-credit scene with Thor, with them dropping one of the Infinity Stones off them. I was like, that never came up in Guardians. It doesn't. It's like they bring their quote-unquote Infinity Stone, but that conversation never comes up. I mean, the place explodes, so at some point in time, because it just never comes up. I mean, I guess why would you tell anyone you actually have one? Which is kind of interesting, because I mean, I guess it's a good thing they didn't want to leave it with him, because it's like, well, the fact of the matter, well, his place got blown up, so there's that. But also just because they wouldn't have known that he already had one stashed there too. So maybe that's just kind of supposed to be like a secret plot point that no one's even noticing, like, oh yeah, that's totally happening. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Or maybe that was just something they dropped completely. I don't know. One thing I am curious about too is what stuff that he has collected. Wasn't one of the things in his cages like a dark elf? It looked like it. I mean, obviously he collects a lot of species. I mean, the dark elves were pretty much wiped out completely, finally, in Thor 2. So he probably made sure to get one, not just recently, but probably like after the first war, he probably maybe got one. Or maybe that's just a remnant he did capture after Thor 2. I don't know. I think someone actually brought this up before, and I still tried to look for it. I think I saw it. But you know, there's that horse Thor. I mean, it's literally Thor as a horse, but it's a thing in the comic books. I think he's actually there. I can't remember if it's this or somewhere else. Someone had talked about, like, it's referenced in one of the movies. I think it's like either it's supposed to be in one of the Collector's cages, or the fact of the matter is it's supposed to be like you see its skeleton somewhere. I forgot what it is. But like there is something you see in the background that's got like a red cloak. I assumed that was it, but it was most likely probably something else. Because it looked like it had a cloak kind of red like Thor's cape, but maybe not. Maybe I was just, like I said, mistaken. So I don't know. I am curious too, because it comes up in conversation in this movie too, why Gamora is his favorite daughter, or Thanos' favorite daughter. Because even Nebula is like, thanks a lot, Dad, and I'm glad to hear that. It's kind of interesting, like why Ronan, out of anyone, felt the need that he could stand up to Thanos, because he ended up killing the dude that spoke for Thanos, and it's like you were willing to step up to him. I guess that says a lot about Ronan. Like, hey, you were brave enough to do that, something that no one else is stupid enough to attempt. So that's kind of interesting. I would assume the only other person that'd probably be stupid enough to kind of do that would be Drax. But Drax, probably after his experience being like, yeah, I couldn't take down Ronan, probably no way I could take down Thanos, but we could probably find another means. Because he doesn't even bring it up in the second one about trying to kill Thanos. I mean, that's literally where Volume 1 ends with like, oh, I'm gonna kill Thanos. Obviously, going to get an opportunity later on, but I'm sure like he's not rushing to find Thanos, because it's like, yeah, last thing we need to do is just rush to find Thanos, because in fact is he could probably easily wipe us out. So, and something else that kind of going back to the collector for a little bit is the fact is that Howard the Duck popping up, obviously, and it's something I was wondering. I think I recently saw somebody made a video about this, but about the potential of would they ever make a Howard the Duck movie, and that is a question. I mean, the character has been set up. You show him at the end of Guardians, so it's like, I don't know. Well, I'd be interested to see what you would do with that. Obviously, like, there is the 80s Howard the Duck movie with Leah Thompson in it, which I've not seen in ages. It's obviously that'd be like, that's that, but this is like, oh, this is like a Marvel movie. Like, they'd probably be able to make it interesting. It's the same thing as like Squirrel Girl is one of those characters like I know very little bit about, but people are like, oh no, that like, why don't they make a Squirrel Girl movie? That'd be awesome. Just because I guess it's one of those jokey characters that people have come to love and adore type of situation. So maybe Howard the Duck could kind of fall in those lines too, or at the very least maybe he'll pop up here and there. Maybe he won't ever get his own movie. I mean, maybe we'll kind of see him pop up in the future, and like, I mean, since he already exists out there in space, last time we saw him he was on Nowhere in the Collectors, not unless the Collector recollected him. But you never know with things like that. I mean, they could be throwaway things, or it could just be like, well, it's there in case we ever decide we do want to do something with it. We can reference, it's like, yeah, we already set this up, so let's do something with it now. And it's kind of interesting too, because this all does tie into Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. too, because this storyline plays a big role in a lot of the space stuff, because the Kree constantly pop up in Agents of S.h.i.E.L.D. They even pop up in the most recent season, season 5, so eventually it could pop up in the future too, especially because a lot of that Kree stuff is still left open in a sense. Stuff in season 5 kind of left like, oh yeah, that don't worry, the Kree are still out there strong as ever. There's still that whole situation. So, you know, because the Kree have not circled, to my knowledge, the Kree haven't circled back around in the movies. I guess because they have popped up on Agents of S.h.i.E.L.D. It's like, well, they exist in that universe, so let's utilize them in that regard. Moments I feel like still hold up amazingly is one, the Groot sacrificing himself, "We are Groot" line still gets me. I still got a little teary-eyed. Like, it's the third time and it still got me. I think I even got it spoiled for me the first time, but it still hit me just as hard anyway. I was like, no, it's like, it's such a beautiful moment, especially Rocket being like, no, you'll die. Then finally, like, obviously the distraction moment, and then like Peter grabbing the Infinity Stone and all of them working together, and he's like, how is this possible? We're the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm like, that's such a good moment. It's such like a powerful moment, because it's like, for one, you're seeing your heroes for the first time, someone wielding an Infinity Stone, good guy wise, so it's kind of crazy to see it kind of happen. And probably another favorite moment of mine would probably hands down have to be like Peter going back for his music, and Drax is like, you were so brave, I'm glad to fight by your side, what did you go back for? And it's like, he looked at the kiss it and he's like, you're an imbecile. Like, but I mean, because I love that moment for Peter too, of being like, when he sees the dude listening to the music, he's like, no, that's mine. All those songs out there belong to me. Obviously, it's very important to him because that's the last thing he has of his mom. Which I'm also curious, like, I feel bad for that big alien, because he started liking the music too, and it's like, oh, poor bastard. And now moving on to, obviously, me rewatching Avengers Age of Ultron. Man, it is crazy how much I've forgotten by rewatching this movie. Many things. For one, I'd completely forgotten the fact is that this all started because of Hydra. It didn't click in my head when I saw the end of Winter Soldier, like the whole thing with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, that this was about Hydra. Maybe it did, and I just completely forgot when I was talking about it, but it just didn't click in my head that that's what that was all setting up, because it basically, in between Winter Soldier and this movie, which has been like a couple months to a year, I don't remember when Winter Soldier came out and when Age of Ultron came out. I assume it was kind of like roughly a year speaking, but in that time the Avengers came together. Like, obviously, like I said, it's a lot of stuff that didn't get, like, we still didn't get context about, like last time where we left Natasha's situation in Winter Soldier is one example, but basically they've come together to wipe out the last of Hydra, which is kind of interesting because S.h.i.e.L.D. is technically doing the same thing on Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. That's the whole thing still happening. So there's that. Plus, the fact of the matter is that Fury actually pops up in this movie. I've been completely wrong this entire time, because in my mind I was like, no, the last time Fury pops up in a movie, it's got to be, technically it's you know, Winter Soldier, but then it's like technically within the MCU, I was like, oh, it has to be Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. No, he pops up in this movie. I'd completely forgotten. I was like, that's crazy. How did I forget that entire plot? It's not like he's only in it like, oh, he's in it for like a time. It's like he's in it not a big chunk, but like in multiple scenes. I'm like, how did I completely forget that? I mean, it's been a while since I saw the movie. It's been like obviously 3 years, but still, that's crazy. I mean, obviously, like, I remembered certain things, like obviously Ultron. I didn't remember him being as snarky as he was. I thought that's kind of interesting. I think it's also because I like Ultron simply because it's like, it's James Spader playing him, and I just adore James Spader because of him on the Blacklist. So, but just him as Ultron, like, I didn't remember him being as like so snarky. He cuts off Claw's arm. Completely forgot about that. I was like, oh wait, Claw is in the movie? Because I remember someone saying like Claw had popped up before, but I couldn't remember from what. And now I was like, oh, it didn't look like he had that arm. So I was like, oh, he must lose it or something. It's like, oh yeah, Ultron cuts it off, and he's just like, oh no, I'm so sorry. No, it's gonna be okay. It's okay, but come on, don't compare me to Tony Stark. Which is like, I love that he got so pissy about the whole situation. I do love that even though he's trying to be better than humans, he does have a lot of human mannerisms and stuff like that. Like I said, he's got these like quips and jokes. And I feel like he was like, other than like, maybe it's just me, but other than Loki, he was the first villain. I feel like now in retrospect, like I said, I completely forgot that part of his personality. It's kind of sad because it's one of those things where a lot of people tend to not remember a lot of the movie, because this is one of those movies in the MCU that people don't really like. It's not bad, but it's not as whoa as the first Avengers movie for most people, which I think it's kind of sad. Because even I think I remember hearing and reading a while back, like Joss Whedon said there was like a lot more he wanted to do with it, but just I think a lot of stuff got cut out and stuff like that. Because like I remember a lot of people being like not being able to figure out exactly what Ultron wanted, which I guess I can see that thought process, but at the same time, it makes sense to me. It's like, it's kind of interesting in retrospect with a lot of stuff, because for one, it's like, oh yeah, Ultron in the comic books is typically made by Ant-Man, but in the MCU movies, because obviously this is like one of those great examples of some of the big changes that they make between the movies and the comic books. I'm not that familiar with it. That's just one little bit of tidbit of information that I know. And it was kind of interesting because literally the next movie in the lineup is Ant-Man, so it's kind of interesting. But I wonder, was it made for the exact same reason? Because Ultron, you know, and this was made because it's like, no, I want something that will exist beyond us, so we don't have to fight forever, something to protect, or because it's all. And I completely forgot about that. Like what Tony experienced in Avengers didn't completely go away when he dealt with it in Iron Man 3. It still persisted because for him that fear. And it's interesting too, because Scarlet Witch kind of blames herself later on, because like all this kind of came together because her and Quicksilver helped Ultron, but at the same time she's the one that kind of started this because she got inside of Tony's head. I mean, but the thing is, like, the question is, like, is that really 100% on her? Because Tony and Banner were already working on this anyway. Maybe she just kind of moved up their time frame. Maybe she kind of pushed him to kind of decide to use the staff's power more, so maybe nothing would have happened. I mean, to be fair, it's just kind of things kind of went out of control. They got something started, but they didn't, it wasn't where it is now. It just kind of gave birth on its own, but that's because they were messing with powers they didn't understand. I mean, they didn't realize it at the time, but they were messing with an Infinity Stone, so obviously it did something. It jump-started something with this whole thing that they were creating, and that quickly led to it taking over, you know? Strucker being in this movie caught me by surprise. It's like, oh yeah, because his son is obviously pops up a few times in Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D., but it's kind of like, I could never remember what part his dad played. Apparently, at least to my knowledge, his dad never pops up in the show, does it? Maybe he does, and I just don't remember. Because I think there are some actors that cross over into Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D. I think his Strucker might have been one of them, but I don't remember. I definitely know his son Alex is in it, but he dies in this movie because Ultron ends up killing him. Going back to it, like what really started all of this, and that was like Tony's fear, and it's because the fear wasn't just that all his friends were dead, it's just that he was the only one that was alive, and it's just, like I said, he sees like the s.h.i.e.L.D. attacking again, and like Earth's there, it's defenseless, you know? It's that situation of he tried to build a world where it's like, oh yeah, like there's a suit of armor around it. That's what Ultron was supposed to be, but it's like, no, like, you know, and Banner was like, oh, that's a cold world, Tony. He's like, I've seen a colder world, and that's, you know, a world invaded again. Because, I mean, you could make the argument like Tony saw what Nick saw, like, yeah, something like this potentially happening because of what happened with Thor, and the fact this is an alien invasion happened, something that had never happened in this world before, at least to their knowledge. Once again, that depends on what that whole Captain Marvel situation ends up being or not. But it's like, obviously, and once again, Infinity War. But, you know, at this point in time, like, they had never had an invasion of that scale. So I mean, all of Earth's biggest issues so far had all kind of been up to that point had all been kind of man-made. Obviously there have been outside forces, obviously Infinity Stones kind of playing a role. That's usually when things kind of get the most hectic on Earth, you know. There's one scene that Ultron did that I really like. It's like him talking to Natasha, and partway through the conversation, his new body comes and rips his old body apart. I was like, I completely forgot about that scene. I was like, oh, that's a good scene. Also, Thor's vision is kind of crazy because obviously he got a vision of, well, Vision. Like obviously it was like Scarlet Witch, she tries to get in your head, but I guess because he is an Asgardian, like it didn't it got into his head a little bit, but it didn't sink completely in. It's kind of interesting because you have like Heimdall coming to him being like, oh, like kind of talking about how destructive Thor can be, he'll destroy everything, which is kind of like, huh. I mean, all that's kind of, I'm assuming, just, you know, referencing Ragnarok, but also like I mean, like the lightning flowing off his body. I was like, oh, is that like, because we know in, like, you know, skipping ahead, but in Ragnarok he doesn't have Mjolnir, and like all the power just comes from himself. That's him kind of finally letting go. So that's what I'm wondering, is that was kind of referencing. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I mean, maybe that's not what they were playing at. I don't know. You know, it's probably one of those situations, they probably had the idea. Maybe it was something that was kind of utilized later on. Like, it's like, oh, they had that spark here. I mean, not to make a pun or anything, but and they just kind of like, it kind of got used in the movie later on when they kind of built more upon it when they were writing it. I don't know. But then he has a vision of all the Infinity Stones. There's the one that was supposed to be in the body that Ultron wanted that would eventually become Vision. There's the purple one from Guardians. There's the one in the Tesseract, and then was a red one which I completely forgot about. Is that the one? Is that from the ether? Because when it came together, it's like, isn't that the same? Wasn't that the same material as the ether? Because I remember sifting them dropping off an Infinity Stone at the end to the Collector. I was like, is that what they dropped off? Like, that's what stone they dropped? Because I was like, when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean, because the ether can't be destroyed, so doesn't that mean that it's because they did drop off one, like I said, it didn't pop up in Guardians, but it's still there technically, I would assume, not unless someone already took it in between that time, between Avengers happening and Guardians, or like in between Guardians and Infinity War, somewhere in that time frame someone stole it, or it's still there, whatever the case may be. Like, I'm assuming that's made from the ether. I guess that would make sense why it's so ancient, old, and powerful, and no one can control it. I'm assuming because to my knowledge, like, it should still be with the leader of the Dark Elves, because he was there. Like, I mean, that was the whole point of Thor kind of doing that whole situation, I guess. Like, I mean, you couldn't necessarily destroy the ether, so maybe whatever remnants of it got turned into an Infinity Stone, and they like sent it off to the Collector to shield. So that, I mean, not to shield, but you know, for him to shield, to kind of keep it away from people. So that's kind of an interesting thing, because this was the first movie, and now I'm kind of piecing everything. It's like, oh, so this is where it really came together, because Thor's like, yes, someone's out there manipulating us, someone else is trying to make a play at the Infinity Stones. Like, this is when they first like really like hit the main plot of the movies. Like, this is where the story kind of picks up about the Infinity Stones, because even at the end you have Thanos being like, oh yeah, I guess I gotta do this myself. Other things like Maria Hill, Kobe Smolder's character, I thought Winter Soldier was the last time we saw her. It's like, oh, she's working for Stark now, I guess that never comes back up again. Wrong, it comes up. She's all over the movie. It's like, how am I forgetting major stuff like this? Holy crap. Falcon shows up earlier in the movie, because for him it's like he's secretly working on oh yeah, look, we're looking for Bucky thing, so that's still happening kind of in the background. War Machine shows up. I love that Rhodey's telling the story and stuff like that, and Tony and Thor aren't impressed, and he's like, boom. You know, normally that story kills in front of other people, but you guys, it's just, oh, that was the end of the story. Oh, okay. You know, it's like, oh, after everything they're doing as Avengers, kind of like, oh yeah, your story's pretty cool. And then he retells it later on at the party, and people go, yeah, oh my god, ah! And he's like, yeah. See, I knew my story wasn't lame. What was it that he said? Tony says to Rhodey later on. It's kind of like, he's like, do you think I can't hold my own? He's like, and Tony's like, if we survive this, I will hold your own. He's like, God, you just had to make it weird. It's actually kind of crazy too, because in retrospect, like with the whole Vision situation, and just like what that ends up being, because everyone's just like, wow, like, Tony, you messed up again. But then, you know, obviously Jarvis being put inside a Vision, and it's kind of like, basically it's perfecting what they kind of messed up with Ultron, of like making this psychopathic robot and stuff like that. And even Thor showing up being like, no, Stark was right. And even Bruce is like, oh god, he said he's right. Oh my god, it actually is the end of the world. I even love that whole situation of like, only those who are worthy can move the hammer, and then like Vision effortlessly takes it and hands it to Thor. Everyone's shocked, everyone's like, no one's saying anything, they're just looking because no one can move. I mean, to be fair, which says a lot too, because even Captain America couldn't move it himself. To be fair, because even Thor kind of was like, wait, what the, when he saw that Cap could move it a little bit, which I guess says a lot. I mean, there was a line later on where Tony was like, yeah, I don't trust a man who doesn't have a little darkness. He's like, yeah, maybe you just haven't seen it, which is kind of proof to that. Maybe there is a lot more to Steve that we don't see. I do like that line from Ultron being like, yeah, you're a man who needs a war, which is just, you know, because he's a man out of his time, and for him, he feels like that's all he had. The man who actually had a life that he could potentially go back to. I mean, because every time, like, I mean, it's sad that's all Captain America's life has ever revolved around, like, ever since becoming a winter, I mean, after becoming a soldier, it's been like, oh, what went down in first Avengers, frozen for like 75 years, goes into Avengers, then goes to Winter Soldier, then go into here. It's like, it's always a war, because for him, there's no peaceful life. There's just no life for him. There is for other people, which is why he was so pushing for like, oh yeah, there's a thing between you and Natasha, go for it. Which I love. Even Hawkeye's wife, Laura, had to point out, like, you didn't realize that was going on. She's like, don't worry, when you get older, I'll kind of explain it to you, because he's kind of oblivious. And I remember that being one thing a lot of people had talked about, really liking about this though, is the fact is that Hawkeye kind of got more like liners and stuff to say in his movie, because it is that situation of like, you know, even his wife was worried, it's like, these are gods and people with powers, like, and he's like, you think they don't need me? It's like, no, I'm afraid that they're going to need you. You know, this team is kind of a mess, but is this really a team? And he's like, yeah, but they're my mess. And I love the whole Quicksilver thing. Quicksilver grabs Scarlet Witch and is running, and he's like, keep up, do it. No one would even know. No one would even know. I'm sorry, guys. Last time I saw him, like, Ultron was on top of him. It's like, oh no, he's gone. I mean, I miss him already, which is very sad foreshadowing, considering the fact is that he's the one that sacrificed himself to save Hawkeye and the little boy that Hawkeye was trying to save. Which is God's like, I remembered him dying in this movie. I just couldn't remember the exact circumstances around. I remembered it being like him being filled with like riddled with bullets, and it's just kind of sad that things kind of went down like that. It's that sad moment of like, oh man, it's terrifying, but at the same time, like, what that does, because you see Scarlet Witch like fall down, and just her rage makes all the bots near her, without ripping them apart, she evaporates all of them. Because I mean, technically speaking, she's like one of the strongest, if not the strongest person in the MCU. Like, you don't get to see it utilized a lot, but when she really lets go, she can tear shit up. Which is also an interesting thing. If you never knew this, like, comic book wise, continuity wise, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are technically Magneto's kids. And I say technically because, like, there's been retcons about that situation too. I've actually talked about that because of the Gifted and stuff like that. But this is always kind of an interesting thing. It would have been nice if they had been able to keep Quicksilver, but then it's also at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, because like it kind of gets in that DC area situation, because it's like, oh yeah, because like at the same time, let's not forget X-Men is going on, and I guess Quicksilver falls in that category of mutants, but at the same time, it's like, obviously they're just using enhanced. Which I'm curious what other enhanced people they've ever come across, because when time came, it's like, oh man, there's two enhanced here we got to deal with, you know. I also did like that line from when S.h.i.e.L.D. was talking about their powers and stuff like that, you know, Cap was kind of like, oh yeah, some kid who gets experimented on by a German soldier for the sake of their country. I mean, who would do something like that? What kind of crazy person would do something like that? And I was like, all right, they are literally in the same situation as you. Side note, I love that thing at the party where it's like Thor and Tony are going back and forth. It's like, oh yeah, Pepper is doing this. And it's like, oh yeah, but Jane's doing this. This is back and forth. And then just like, a quick intuitive, and then being like, Thor being like, Jane's better, and then it goes to the next scene. I thought that was kind of neat. Oh, Natasha and Hulk storyline, like I said, I remember this kind of being the movie that really pushed it, but I didn't remember like they actually wanted to run away together, like it, because it's the scene that comes up later on during Ragnarok. But it's kind of sad because this is the last time her and Hulk see each other, because for him it's like, he felt like there was no life between him and Natasha, but obviously we learned about Natasha's past a little bit more, about what she was kind of forced to go through to become the assassin that she is. Because for her, she didn't think there was any more to her, because that's why there was even that line I thought that was great, where it's like, who's the real monster on the team between us, that she even looks at herself. But he left because even in that state of being the Hulk, he knew that, like, okay, being who he is, there'd be no future for him. He was still thinking about that. And I think for him, it was just kind of like he didn't want to take the chances of, like, no matter what the circumstances are, like, it wouldn't work out. Like, for him, in his mind, he will always be the biggest monster. Like, that she isn't some monster. And I think he didn't want to drag her into his world, you know? He even kind of makes references to it because he's like, yeah, there's no place on this planet that's safe for me or something like that, which is funny because like, next time we see you, you're not on this planet. And I guess that also makes sense what Thor was up to this entire time, like, because like for him, he's basically chasing down Thanos, unbeknownst to him. He doesn't know at the time, but he's looking for Thanos because he's trying to figure out who's manipulating everything, trying to get the Infinity Stones and stuff like that. Like overall, like the action is amazing in this movie where everyone's just kind of working together, especially like when it's coming to ripping apart all those Ultron bots. Obviously that part of Sokovia that lifts up. It's kind of interesting because obviously like the next movie obviously is Ant-Man, but beyond that is Civil War, and a lot of this is what plays into Civil War. What happens in this movie is kind of what pushes Tony even further later on to blame himself about the fact is that we need to be put in check. You know, we can't be left unguarded, you know, kind of the registry and stuff like that later on. Obviously other things playing to a part to that, but we'll get to that when we get to it. I personally still really like this movie. I know like a lot of people have mixed feelings about the movie. Like I said, they're kind of like, it's okay. It's not as great as the first one. And rewatching a lot of it, like I feel like I got an even bigger appreciation for the movie because of certain things. I'm like, oh man, this leads to this, and just because with future knowledge added into, I feel like it adds even more context to a lot of stuff in this, which I personally like, but maybe that's just me kind of pulling strings that I don't necessarily need to pull, essentially. Which, that's another thing too, I almost let slip my mind. This is our first like talks of Wakanda, like the whole vibranium that Ultron ended up getting from Claw. Like that's what I meant to bring up earlier, is just the fact is that all that huge tie-in like that, like, oh, now we kind of get that talk, because even Cap and Tony were looking at each other. It's like, oh, I thought your dad got the last stuff. Apparently not. I mean, there is an entire country that's sitting on top of a crap ton of it, but obviously we'll get to that when we get to that in Black Panther. Like I said, one of those things is just kind of like, holy crap, like knowing what you know in the future and stuff like that, now you're kind of like, huh. It's really interesting too, because let's not forget, like I said, that one of the next movies, it's Civil War, and Wakanda kind of plays a part in that, because obviously that's where Black Panther first pops up and everything. So, but like I said, the next movie is Ant-Man. I'm very excited to kind of get to that next. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.